Well, good morning, everybody, from in hashtag Nation. Paul here, because breaking news is that the Chargers running back Melvin Gordan has decided that he is not coming to camp unless he gets a new contract. So the Bills have a rather glaring long-term view at the running back position. So the question becomes, are the Bills in play for Melvin Gordan, right? So again, from a long-term perspective, you look at what the Bills have. Bills have Frank Gore, they have LaShawn McCoy, they have Devin Singletary, T.J. Yeldon. So that's a stable of running backs that are in Buffalo right now. So the question becomes: are the Bills really going to be in play for Melvin Gordon? Yes or no? So I don't know. Let's take a look at it. I haven't spent any time looking at this, so we're going to kind of look at it from start to finish and kind of see, is Melvin Gordon a fit? Both from an injury history standpoint, and then you have to take a look at a schematic standpoint, a salary standpoint. There's a lot going on here. So what we are going to do first is let's take a look at Melvin Gordon's injury history, right? Because that's always the big deal. Yeah, it's a little tough sell for me right now that Melvin Gordon, thanks Jacob, a little tough sell for me that that Melvin Gordon's going to be joining the Bills, although it is via trade and we've seen crazier things happen. So again, let's just take a look and see if we can figure it out. So from Melvin Gordon, from an injury history standpoint, Melvin Gordon actually played 16 games for the first time ever in 2017. He's entering his 5th year in the league. If that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what does, right? And in 2018, it's always that right leg, man. So he's had issues. He tore his meniscus in 2015. Sprained his PCL in late 2016. And again, we're talking about right leg, right leg, right leg, right leg. So everything has always been that right leg. Really a dominant player when he's on the field. But one of the things that you run into is the fact that he is handcuffed by one of the, I mean, really, in my opinion, one of the best handcuff running backs in the NFL, in Austin Eckler. Eckler's just an awesome asset to have when you've got when you've got a back like Melvin Gordon. But again, the fact still remains: is Melvin Gordon still a fit for the Bills? Injury history is always a big deal, right? So we've seen the Bills take chances on guys who have missed whole seasons, but not guys with nagging injuries, right? Guys with nagging injuries seem to fall off of Buffalo's need to have list, right? So even in the free agent market, they tend to avoid these guys. And as far as what the Chargers would look at for a player like Melvin Gordon, I mean, you're looking big time. I mean, real big time. And he's not going to show up to any team that he gets traded to unless he gets a new contract. Now, we've seen this play out before with LaShawn McCoy, right? So from a comfort standpoint, I know everybody's going to say, well, the Bills did it with LaShawn McCoy, so why can't they do it with a player like Melvin Gordon? Let's not forget that was a totally different regime, and Chip Kelly was basically giving LaShawn McCoy away for free, right? So a very different scenario of what happened in Buffalo when LaShawn joined versus now. Below zero, whoa, we're considering this, or is it hypothetical? Well, news just came out officially that Melvin Gordon's not showing up unless he gets a new contract. So it's not that this has happened. This is, he's not coming. So San Diego's either going to have to give him a new contract, or he's going to happen, or he's going to have to get traded. So it's not been official yet. This is brand new. This literally just broke just a few minutes ago. The dust hasn't even settled on it. So what we're walking through is Melvin Gordon a fit for the Bills? Would the Bills even be interested? What would the compensation be? What would his contract have to be? So this is kind of laying out whether it's a realistic idea or not, right? So if we're looking at what Melvin Gordon's going to want from a contract perspective, he's going to want Todd Gurley money, right? And not even the Rams want to pay Todd Gurley money right now with his injury history. So we're probably looking closer to teams are probably going to want to look closer to a David Johnson deal and not a Le'Veon Bell deal, right? So yeah, this is just chat so far. Thank you, Danger, for clearing that up. As far as Clowney goes, John, we'll get to Clowney this coming week. Okay, so when we do the episode for when we record Saturday, we'll probably end up talking about Clowney again, because we've been asked that question a lot. Hey, Stefan, what's up? So David Johnson right now is on a $39 million deal, right? Again, that's going to be pretty close to where we're looking at for Melvin Gordon. That's what teams are going to be, I think, comfortable paying him. But David Johnson really doesn't have a massive history of injuries in the NFL. I know he lost a season to a broken hand, but it's not a it's not a knee injury like Melvin Gordon has had problems with. So even Devontae Freeman's contract or what LaShawn McCoy was signed to when he came to Buffalo, those are realistic contracts for what teams might look. So the fact of the matter is, at this point, let's say you're looking at LaShawn McCoy's deal, right? Let's say that's the market value for Melvin Gordon, which I think is about right, given the time that he's missed. That is a $40 million deal, right? So that was about $8 million per. So can the Chargers even afford to pay that? Well, the Chargers are kind of in a little bit of a rough spot because they've only got about $10 million in cap space right now. Five of that is Melvin Gordon, right? So if you're going to start looking at what you're going to do with Melvin Gordon, it means if you're going to re-sign him and you're going to pay him this year, you don't have the space to do it, right? So that frees up and talks about other players, right? Does that bring, do you have to deal Keenan Allen to get Melvin Gordon a contract extension? Do you have to deal Mike Williams to get Keenan Allen or to get Melvin Gordon a contract extension? What about Mike Pouncey? What are you going to do with him? So this plays into a very fascinating conversation because the Bills have had conversations with San Diego before. The Chargers don't have the space to give Melvin Gordon more money. Not this, not next year. Like, they're in a rough spot. This is a bad time for them to have to be put in this situation. However, with that being said, does it open up an opportunity for moving another player? Now, if you want to tell me that they're willing to deal Melvin Ingram, now we're talking, right? So maybe we're talking about the wrong Melvin here. Now, Melvin Ingram has a massive contract. Most of it's guaranteed for this season. His cap number is $19.6 million, which is just an absurd contract. But you start looking at what this team needs, and I mean, if you want to get a little bit more aggressive at that defensive end position, Melvin Ingram's there, and he's going to be here and he would be here for this year, and then his cap number drops to 16 mil next year. So he would be a nasty player to add. But if you're San Diego, you got to start looking at what your options are. San Diego, listen to me. If you're the Chargers, you have to start looking at what your options are regarding Melvin Gordon and how it's going to impact the rest of your team. And again, if you start looking at contracts, he's going to want, because there's a big gap, right? So let me just illustrate this a little more. There's three players basically making $13 million a year. It's Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, and David Johnson. That's the money that Melvin Gordon's going to want, right? If you start looking at the next tier, there's a massive gap. The next gap is Devonta Freeman and LaShawn McCoy, and they're making $8 million. And Saquon Barkley's making just underneath that, right? But that's off that rookie contract. So the question again becomes, what do you do if you're the Chargers? Do you pay him $10 million and say, listen, we'll split the difference, right? But that's all your cap space. That's it. Your cap space is gone for the rest of the season. Once you start cutting guys from the 90-man roster, you'll make some of that space up, but for the most part, that'll be gone. So do you want to pay him a $50 million deal? You give him 10 mil per season for 5 years at $50 million. I mean, you could do that, right? They'd have the space technically right now to do that, but it would be backing them into a corner. And do you really want to pay a guy with right leg injuries that much money? Or would it be more valuable to just deal Melvin Gordon if you're the Chargers and get something for him? Yeah, Shivas Goal says too expensive. Yeah, I agree. That's a lot of money for a player with knee injuries, if you're asking me, right? From an age perspective, totally fine, right? Totally fine with Melvin Gordon. Love the player that he is. But again, Melvin Gordon has benefited the last 2 seasons from having a wonderful handcuff in Austin Eckler. So the team really trusts Eckler to take over when he's not there. And they put him in a lot of situations in third down packages and in second and long packages where they can get Gordon off the field in those circumstances. So Austin Eckler is a phenomenal player. So now we have to start talking about, well, what if the Bills are really interested? What would compensation be, right? Well, first off, if you're going to start taking a look at what's going to happen with the Buffalo Bills, you also have to look at what the fate of LaShawn McCoy is going to be, because you're not going to have Melvin Gordon and LaShawn McCoy and Frank Gore and TJ Yeldon, right? It's not going to happen, right? You really got to look at kind of freeing yourself up of that. If you were to just straight cut LaShawn McCoy, you're saving $6.4 million. I'm not championing any of this, but if we're going to have the conversation, let's have the conversation, right? So that would bring the Bills up to about $28 million in cap space, right around there. And that would allow them to pay Melvin Gordon $10 million a season. Listen, I don't think he's going to get 13 mil a season, not for a guy with the injury history in that leg that he's had. Thank you, Rosanna. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's good to be back. At 10 mil a season, I mean, that would put him right where LeSean McCoy is. LeSean's at 9, Melvin Gordon's at 10. So if you're looking at a swap, not a bad swap, right? When you're going to get 4 years younger, sure. But again, that injury history is a little too scary for me. Now, what would the Bills give up as far as conversation or compensation? Ooh, unknown user drops in Melvin Gordon to KC. Now that's fascinating. All right, that might be an episode this weekend because that's a really fun conversation. Mario and I have a totally separate channel called #RoadTrip. So whenever we want to talk about something that's not the Bills, that's where that kind of stuff goes. We've been very busy with Bills talk, so we haven't really done a lot on that channel. So #RoadTrip, that very well could be the conversation. And Stephen, you're right. He's not. Melvin Gordon is not LeSean McCoy, right? And a lot of people are going to prefer to keep McCoy, like John Patrick says. Very true, right? But when you start talking about just dollars and cents, you're only looking at paying an extra $1 million for Melvin Gordon over LeSean McCoy. Is it worth the chance? Because you know McCoy's not going to get better, right? We know where McCoy is, right? So the question becomes, is McCoy going to get better? Kevin King to Seattle. These are all great things. We're definitely gonna have to cut a #RoadTrip video. Thank you, King, for that. From a contract standpoint, the Bills absolutely could absorb 5 for 50, right? That would be totally fine if they want to do a 5-year deal for $50 million. But the question becomes, what's the compensation for that, right? We know the Chargers are going to be asking for at least a first-round pick. No way they're going to get it, right? If they get a first-round pick for a player that's going to cost $10 million a season on a new deal, good for them. But there's no way in the world that that's going to happen. Now, Gordon, from a player standpoint, he's solid out of the backfield. He can pick up a blitz. He's a 3-down back in the NFL. He's a very legit 3-down back. He's a top 7 back in the NFL, as far as, if you ask me, just off the top of my head. It may be higher on that list, but he's definitely a top 10 back in the NFL. But it's a top 10 back worth $10 million a season. Yeah, probably, right? If you're the Buffalo Bills, I got to say, yeah, probably. You look at the future of the position, and Gordon and Devin Singletary, that would be a real nice tandem to have because it kind of mirrors what they have already between Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler with the Chargers. So that wouldn't be a bad combination. And then you take a look at where the future is for Melvin Gordon. And that bar graph is still kind of going up, right? You're going to have another year or two of really peak performance by Melvin Gordon. And then that's when you start to have to worry about a slide, right? It's not this season, not next season, but really as far as what's going to happen, on the downturn. Danger, I know my other team isn't going for him. Who's your other team, Danger? Who's that other team? Unknown user, Justin Jackson, fantasy owner in a Dynasty League, and I'm open for a trade. Yeah, I don't blame you, right? So, man, that's a deep Dynasty League if you're grabbing guys like that. So as far as a peak goes for Melvin Gordon, right? You have a peak and it's still on the way up. That bell curve's still on the way up. Sooner or later, you're going to get to the same point that you are with LeSean McCoy, where you're going, okay, well, we're going to ride out the year, right? Let's see how it goes. There might be another year or two here, right? Let's see what's up. Let's see how far we can keep this going. However, right, there's going to come a point where you do have to look realistically at whether you'd rather have Melvin Gordon or LeSean McCoy, if you're interested in trading a pick for him. Now, if you want to trade a second and a third, one this year, this upcoming draft, and the third the following year, I don't look at that as major compensation. I know this team is in the need of starters, but a lot of their free agents, they signed to 2-year deals. So when you sign a bunch of free agents to 2-year deals, that tells me as an organization that you're okay with missing a couple draft picks the following year, right? Because you've got a lot of these guys on 2-year contracts. The dust obviously still has to settle down from the 90 men, but there's no universe that LeSean McCoy and Melvin Gordon stay on the same team. There's not a universe that exists, right? Because you are not going to play, you're not going to pay $20 million just alone to your running back group. The Texans are major players for Gordon because they are a running back away, right? They're a running back away. Danger, because he's a Steelers fan, James Conner was a phenomenal back in college, so the Steelers really got a nice deal on him. And that system's just awesome. That's another thing. Does Melvin Gordon walk into a system that has an identity or not? You go grab as many great players as you want, but the question is, are you going to be able to use them effectively, right? He's a great player, sure, but the reason the Bills' defense is so interchangeable from a defensive back standpoint, that you really have to, you could slide guys in and out, right? Yeah, the Bengals. Joe Mixon is a wonderful player. I love it. I love Joe Mixon. Um, so the defense has an identity, right? The offense doesn't yet. So by going out and acquiring a player like Melvin Gordon, you're saying, listen, all our chips are in on the table. We're in, and don't forget, if you sign Melvin Gordon to a contract extension for 5 seasons, that means that last season is the only season that's going to impact Tremaine Edmonds, and the only season that's going to impact Josh Allen, right? That's it. You start looking at some of the other players that you want to sign to extensions. Deion Dawkins. You're gonna have to examine whether you want to do that or not. You're gonna have to look at Trey White. You're gonna have to look at Matt Milano. You've got guys that you want to sign to extensions, but bringing in Melvin Gordon doesn't steal their money necessarily. You may lose one of those guys, and I think Dawkins would probably be the one that falls off the table there. But the Bills have the cap space, but it's would the Chargers want to give it up for a second and a third, or just give them the extension? But if they give them the extension, they're going to have to do some serious cap management. Nate Raymond says Gore is better. I don't know. Gore is about 10 years older. That's a fact, right? But Frank Gore is just an animal. He and Adrian Peterson are just, there's something about their DNA that is just different than everybody else, right? I don't know what it is, but there's something about Frank Gore and Adrian Peterson that their bodies are just not all human, right? Now, you do have to look at getting younger. So does Melvin Gordon with Devin Singletary make a lot of sense? I mean, if you're Buffalo, I think there's a conversation that you can have there, right? I don't know, man. This is a tough one because I really do want to see what Shady can do with the revised offensive line. But I know that that's a one-year solution because we're going to have to come right back to the table and you're going to have to start talking contract extension with LeSean McCoy right after that. So, I mean, I think Gore is better than Ivory. The conversation going on in the chat. Yeah, I think Gore is better than Ivory. Ivory was credited from Fox with four drops last season, which led the team. I was a little surprised by that because some of the biggest plays of the year were Chris Ivory dump-off passes that went the distance, right? So those were some of the biggest plays of the season for Buffalo last year. But from a cap space, not a big deal, right? But from a compensation standpoint, that's where you start getting a little dicey. And then once you start looking at large contracts for players with injury history, you could really be hamstrung to that contract. And if you're hamstrung to that contract, that's going to impact the young core and nucleus of players that you're trying to build. And it does kind of chop the legs out on the Devin Singletary conversation right now, right? Bill should resign Nate Peterman. Is there a cliff I can jump off of? Please no. Please no more. No. So I just wanted to bring that conversation forward and at least have an honest conversation about Melvin Gordon is saying he's not coming to the Chargers unless he gets a new contract. Well, what's that new contract going to be? Is it going to be top 5? If it's top 5, let's not forget LeSean McCoy's in that top 5 right now at about $9 million a season. So what's it look like? Well, there's 3 guys making $13 million, right? And they are your 3 top running backs in the NFL between David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, and Todd Gurley, right? Outside of that, there's a $5 million gap just about of everybody else, right? The next highest player. So the Chargers can come to the table and say, listen, we'll slide you into that middle. You're not getting Todd Gurley money because, as I said before, not even the Rams want to pay Todd Gurley money, especially with his injury history. And now you're looking at just doubling down on that conversation with Melvin Gordon. So does this open up an opportunity for Peterman for INT coach? That's awesome, Deja. Thank you for that. That's hysterical. Now, does the conversation for Melvin Gordon and getting him that money in San Diego, does that open the opportunity for the Bills to slide in and start talking trade on an ancillary asset from the Chargers? It does, right? The one problem that I will say is that the Chargers are an aging team, right? Those assets they're going to be veteran players. They're not going to be young players. It's they are not a young team, right? You're not looking at trading for a team that's building off of youth. They've been trying to, and things just haven't gone particularly well for them as far as that's concerned. They do have some young players that you could absolutely go and snag, but they've also got some overpaid players that I'm sure they would love to shed. But are the Bills that close to be able to say, you know what? Melvin Ingram sounds great for 2 years, right? You're giving up a first round pick for Melvin Ingram. Like, there's no doubt about that. And he only solves your defensive end problem for, at this point, 2 seasons. And you're gonna pay out the nose for him. But could it be possible? I mean, I guess there's a conversation to be had about that as well. Once a player demands, a player that's critical to the unit that he reports on. So once a critical defensive player, inside linebacker, or a really dominant defensive end, once they say, I'm not coming unless I get a new contract, and you look at the layout of the team, you really do have to talk about whether or not there's going to be space for that. And right now, there's not a lot of space to give Melvin Gordan more money with the Chargers. Schematically, Melvin Gordan could do anything you ask him to. The question is he going to be healthy enough in order to maintain that? And is he going to be able to maintain health throughout that process? That's a major, major, major problem for him, especially with that right leg. It's just injury after injury after injury. And he blew the meniscus out in that leg as well in 2015. Not that matters anymore. Adrian Peterson is basically half robot. At this point, it doesn't seem to impact him too much. But is it possible? I mean, the Bills have the space. They could do it. They've traded for running backs who have wanted a new contract before. But again, put that in frame, right? This is also kind of a long-term conversation, right? That was a different regime that traded for LaShawn McCoy and gave him that contract extension. I know it's the Buffalo Bills, but don't forget that was a totally different front office, different head coach. That was a couple head coaches ago at this point, so it feels. And there's just, could it happen? If it happens for a second and a third the following year, that's very possible. And I know D. Brownwell brings up, I know that Gordan isn't Adrian Peterson. That is 100% true. That's impossible to say that anybody's Adrian Peterson. However, you're going to get 4 years younger here for about the same amount of money. It's a position of need. Okay, right? For those of you who are curious, Mario is now in the chat. So a 5-year deal for Gordan only really impacts Trey White and Matt Milano and Deion Dawkins. Those are the three guys that can most impact, right? As far as Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds, those guys are going to have a 5th-year option. There will be 1 year of Melvin Gordan on a 5-year deal. There would be 1 year where their new contracts would roll into that Melvin Gordan contract. But at that point, his injury history, may just cause him not to be on this team anymore. If you were to go out and look at a player like Melvin Gordan, it's going to cost you. But schematically, he can do everything that you want, right? You could just wait for him to hit free agency. That's also a possibility. I saw that just got brought up. Nate, but could we just give him a big deal instead? I mean, if you're going to wait for Gordan to hit the free agent market, you could. He could do what Le'Veon Bell did and just not show up, right? And then eventually hit the free agent market. I suppose that's possible. But again, you could get him now. I think there's a little bit of a guarantee there. And we saw what happened when Le'Veon Bell hit the open market. He was a $13 million player. And I don't think the Bills are really all that interested when you start drafting players in the 3rd round to fill the position. I'm not really thinking that you want any part of paying Melvin Gordan $13 million. There's just no way that's going to happen. All right, guys. So thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate all of this. Thank you for joining in. Again, leave anything that you have in the comments section. Love to hear what you have to say about this. Could it be a fit? I suppose it could. There's a lot here, right? There's a lot to unpack. So is it really Gordan that would be the conversation? Is it a different player on the Chargers because they need to free up space for Melvin Gordan? There's a lot to be had here. Put your heads on it. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Thanks for joining on this quick slant video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.